All right, and we're live. Joined here by 40 ounce. Going to be discussing today just the future of the two parties here in the United States, the two dominant parties, that being the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and in general, just the ideologies that are established in the left and the right at this point, and some of the infighting going on. So, how are you doing today, 40?
I'm doing okay. Doing as good as I can.
Having troubles with the computer and whatnot, right?
Yeah, it's a little frustrating, but I'm working through it. I'm actually gonna have my computer fixed not this week, but next week. I've got a part ordered, and I'm hoping to get it fixed very soon afterwards. So
Okay,
shouldn't be too long before I get my
awesome.
baby back.
Yeah, hell yeah, I feel you on. There's not much you can do without a computer.
Yeah, it's a little rough.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I want to start with the left, um, as we both probably know a little bit more about the right, and we can get into that in more detail in the latter half of the video. Um, but for the left, just to kick it off, I have this interesting article that a friend of mine shared on Facebook. A more liberal friend of mine, I should say. And it's unknown source. I don't know. I've never heard of them, but it's being shared by many liberals right now, and it's entitled "When Exactly Did Pride Become a Party for Straight Teens?" Um, and I think that this is it's written by a liberal journalist. I think it kind of presents to us the infighting going on within the left, especially amongst the LGBTQ community. It seems like pride parades are becoming raves for millennial leftists, um, and that's upsetting more progressive leftists, I guess. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can kind of attack this from two sides. Regarding the millennials first, of course. I can see why they would be actually a little concerned of the kind of hijacking of pride parades by millennials, strictly due to the fact that millennials are becoming increasingly conservative, or at least increasingly libertarian, I should say. Statistics show that the modern millennials and even like the Gen Z starting to come out and everything, they're in high school currently, and they're about to start coming out of high school. They're increasingly fiscally conservative, yet they are socially, I don't want to say progressive, but they're socially liberal. So they're okay with gay marriage and transsexual and all that. It's all the weird shit like I identify as a unicorn or a helicopter or something. That's the weird shit that that Gen Zs don't seem to really click with. So I can see why they might be a little concerned on that front. But I can also see why the gay community specifically, and not the progressives as a whole, might be concerned, but the gay community, I can see why they would be concerned specifically due to the fact that their community is generally starting to become radicalized by the kind of the Black Lives Matter crowd. And this is an entirely different crowd. This is an entirely different crowd with very different principles, very different agenda, but they're starting to hijack it. And I'm sure you saw as well with the gay pride flag starting to implement I believe it's a brown and a black stripe.
Yes, yes. Which doesn't make much sense, as
No.
I mean, not that it has before, but yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. So you're saying the younger generation, like even younger than us?
Yeah, Gen Z.
Correct. Yeah. My younger brother, without revealing too much information, he's going to Texas for college, and he's grown up here in California his whole life. He's 10 times, if not more, conservative than I am. Um, but like you said, kind of more socially liberal, which is interesting, and we'll get to like the Merkel shit later because I think that kind of can intertwine with that concept. But yeah, I don't know. I view it as kind of becoming trendy in a way. The LGBTQ movement. Um, I, I I can't quote it because I don't remember the exact source, but there was a statistic I read that something ridiculous like close to 60% of women in our generation uh, associate as bisexual, or pansexual, or just these, quite frankly, these things that I view as just, like I said, kind of trendy
Phases, maybe.
phases. Again, not that I'm no disrespect, onto them in that regard, because I do have more of a problem with the propagation of certain with some of these ideas, not the fact that gay people can get married and that whole thing. That's not really my issue. Um, but yeah, it seems like they're eating themselves alive. It seems like they can't agree upon anything because there's these different sects, like you're saying, like the whole Black Lives Matter, uh, progressive liberal movement, and then you have the LGBTQ side of it. You still have the more neoliberal older types who support Hillary Clinton um, and that wave of liberalism. I
Yeah.
don't know what do you think is going to be the what do you think will win out, or do you think they'll kind of amalgamate back together?
It's actually funny that you mentioned the kind of splitting of these groups. It's funny. I literally just now in that video that you commented on, it was about specifically like tribalism, and it revolved around specifically tribalism. And the problem with the left is that it is split into so many tribes, if you wish to call it that. It's split into the kind of LGBTQ or LGBTQ tribe, excuse me, and then there's the Black Lives Matter tribe, and then there's the this and that and the other. There's the socialists and the communists, and there's an infinitesimal amount of tribes that kind of come together and coagulate into the left.
Right.
Each one with their own set agenda, with their own specific in-group to actually fight for. And that's what I think is amounting to this. That's what I think is going to be the ultimate death of the left. Whereas the right is far more unified in a specific sense that they had to undergo 8 years of Obama. They didn't have the chance to, and I suppose not that they've elected Trump, this is their chance to do so, but under Obama's reign, they did not have the chance to devolve into infighting, and they didn't have the chance to do any of these things that the left did. So the right is much more united in that kind of sense.
Yeah, much more likely to put the differences aside
Yeah,
sooner rather than later.
they understand like compromise, if you will.
Right. Yeah, no, I feel you on that. It definitely seems like there is no cohesion amongst the left as far as an end goal. There really isn't a single policy even that is at their foundation anymore. Their party seems quite hollow. It's filled with the bullshit that YouTube content creators have flooded the internet with at this point. The feminism, there's no real hard hitting political agenda that they're capable, at least, of communicating to us. That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, definitely. Even when you look on the kind of microscopic level, when you go down to not the party as a whole, but when you're going down to the specific federal level of each state, of each blue state, let's say, let's relegate this specifically to blue states, like California, for instance, where we're from. There are senators and congressmen and women and everything. Each one of these people have their own agendas. Like Barbara Boxer, for instance, staunchly anti-gun, and that is pretty much the platform in which she runs on. Versus someone else from some blue state, someone like Sanders, for instance, who for a brief period of time considered himself a Democrat. He has a completely different platform that he's running on. He's running on the kind of socialist platform. So you can
Right.
definitely see the fact that there is no cohesion versus the right, if you want to just flip the coin to the other side, the right on a microscopic federal level, each state, once again, each one of them specifically, they are reiterating the same kind of talking points, and they might just be kind of how would I say? They may be just generic talking points, but they're the same nevertheless, and you can see that the fact that the Republicans are indeed united to a degree.
Right. Yeah, no, I would agree. If there's anything the left is united in, it seems to just be the Russian story that
Yeah,
most leftist, liberal congressmen are pushing. Maxine Waters, for example, out of my particular district, is fucking horrible. She doesn't even live in the district. She's not
yeah,
even propagating anything to help anyone in the district. She goes on live television to speak about Russia.
yeah.
So in that sense, I could see the more populist side of the left taking hold. Um, I can't imagine that this isn't going to start upsetting people. I've already read articles that the left is beginning to be pretty upset about the fact that Obama is taking all these luxurious vacations. It's almost like they're standing there like, come on, man, we're trying to defend you here. Can you get in the fucking game? And meanwhile, he's off jet skiing. So,
Yeah. And the funny part is that that is even after the fact that he has said that he was going to still be involved in DC politics. That's
mhm.
the fucking funny part to me. That's what's so damn hilarious about that.
Yep. Well, not to get too sidetracked, but I do think that he's still very much involved, along with Clinton and her staffers. I mean, they
Yeah.
all still have security clearances. I can guarantee it. If Clinton still has hers, you best believe Obama still has his. Um, there's a lot that they can do with that behind the scenes. Um, but yeah, I agree. They're the public image aspect. They it's lost to them. It seems.
Absolutely. And that's why I think over the next I would gosh, I don't even want to say I don't even want to guess the kind of time period, but I want to say maybe 5 to 10 years. That's when you're going to see a lot more hardened parties with a lot more stronger resolve take hold, especially within the Democrats. You're not going to see the Black Lives Matter. You're not going to see LGB take hold and take the reins of the DNC. You're going to see parties that are maybe more socialist or communist than that of their constituents. You're going to see them start to try and radicalize the base and actually draw them farther towards the left.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, do you think the right will become more nationalistic, fascist, to compare, I guess, in uh, political terms?
That's actually very interesting that you bring that up because that is a point that the left keeps talking about. That's a point that the left keeps bringing up, and it's to the point where it's practically annoying. And it's specifically annoying if you have studied fascism in depth, and that's something I've done. I've studied a fair amount of fascism. I've studied, um, keep saying studied. I've read Mein Kampf. I've read Hitler's second book. I've
Mhm.
read some of the table talks that Hitler and some of his constituents, Hitler and some of his closer allies have held. And I can't ever see the right becoming radicalized because the right has a tendency to kick out extremists. The right, for the past, ever since the Bush era even, the right has been accused of Nazism even. And it's been so habitual to try and kick out and distance itself from Nazism that I can never see that taking hold.
Mhm.
Um, Even if you even want to talk about extreme nationalism, the only thing I can really see maybe taking hold, maybe a few people from the right will adopt some of the rhetoric coming from Hitler's table talks. Hitler speaks specifically not about. Sorry, I'm seeming very fashy right now, but
No. I've actually read not everything you have mentioned, but I've done my fair amount of reading on the subject.
yeah. So I mean, Hitler speaks generally of how fascism or nationalistic movements in general, I should say. Nationalistic movements are basically a seizing of the power by the people. So somewhat like communism, but with a nationalist kind of twang to it. So I can see that taking hold, but you're never going to see the extremism of actual fascism take hold just due to the fact that the right has been accused of fascism for a countless amount of years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that that's why we see the manifestation of the fascism nowadays in such peculiar forms, such as memes and jokes and trolling, because that's the. I feel that that sentiment is there. If I, this might seem very fashy, but if I had to choose between fascism and communism, I think it's a safe bet. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that that's where that sentiment comes from in the memes, the Pinochet memes and things like that. Um, I do think that that will work to maybe radicalize is the wrong word, but push the right. Uh, fuck, how can I say this? Me and my uncle agree on this. My dad doesn't see quite eye to eye, but the Republican Party, the right, they're just such pussies.
Yeah.
And I think that this transformation they're going through is kind of helping them harden up a little bit and learn to draw the line uh, in the sand, so to speak, to put their foot down every now and then. And
Yeah.
maybe that's
Eh,
comparable to some sort of fascist branding or authoritarian nature, but yeah, it's never going to be full scale, like you said.
Yeah. And it's so funny because you see right-leaning extremists trying to hijack these movements. Like I just recently watched a video on YouTube, and this must have been maybe a week or so ago. And what it was a montage of nationalist parties moving through, or sorry, marching rather, throughout streets and everything. And, they're just nationalist movements. They're nothing more than that. But it's set to German nationalist, kind of fascist type music.
Mhm.
And the problem I see with that is that these aren't actual fascist movements. So fascist music has really no place in this montage. But you still see the fact that the nationalists and fascists even are trying to adopt nationalist causes, but you don't see them taking hold. Because looking specifically at Europe, if you want a good example, looking at some of these nationalist movements, all these people are saying is say, well, maybe we should, put a halt on immigration for now. Maybe we should just kind of scale back on immigration just a little bit. Don't build a wall. I mean, we don't want to build walls, but, just
Right.
scale it back a little bit. And yet their left calls them fascists, and the people on the far right, the actual fascists, trying to adopt this movement, but they keep getting kicked out. So the left has really no basis on which to actually try and stand on their argument.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that. I don't fear it, but I do think that if the left adopts more socialist, communist rhetoric and policy in the coming years, that it could lead to a more radicalized right. I'm not opposed to that, actually. I think it's a good thing. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know what.
I'm not opposed to kind of 60s, 70s era kind of nationalism. That's not what I'm specifically opposed to. I'm more opposed to the kind of put the Mexicans in the oven. If you want to put this in American kind of context,
Right.
that's what I'm opposed to, but I don't see the fear of that. I mean, the right is too desperate for the support of minorities to ever go out and say, gas the blacks or whatever it might be.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, I guess the most I could see happening is I did a video a couple days ago about the Supreme Court, ruling in favor of Trump's
Oh yeah.
travel ban and whatnot. Uh, and I'm of the opinion that they should just put a halt to immigration for all immigration for quite some time, maybe for the remainder of his first term in office. And it seems radical, but as far as the population goes and resources go, and the economic troubles that come with the mass immigration, I think it would be smart. And if anything, I could see that. I could see that sort of thing starting to take hold. Those sorts of sentiment, that sort of rhetoric being presented to the American people in like you said, 5 to 10 years, if the left begins to further polarize.
Yeah. And what's so funny is that 15, 20, maybe even like, or yeah, even 30, 40, 50 years ago, that stance is technically not even considered one of radical proportions. That's considered a logical stance. Because
Right.
everyone knows that immigrants, the first, second, third wave immigrant, they do not assimilate very well. In fact, they're very resilient to assimilation. I mean, if looking at Irish and Italian immigrants coming over, and even German immigrants coming over during the 1800s, a lot of these people, they took 50, 60 years to actually assimilate to American customs, like American way of life, even in just the structure of their kind of local laws and so forth.
Absolutely. And I mean, like you said, 30, 40 years ago, I don't think it was viewed as such a radical stance, like you said, because I mean, it is logical. The country reserves the right. What's the point of having a sovereign nation and borders if you're not allowed to control the influx of immigration into your country? At that point, it pretty much just becomes other countries dictating upon you uh, or your nation uh, what's to be done as far as immigration goes.
Yeah,
Um, and that's my fear with activism and the sorts. I honestly think that activism is quite stupid. Um,
yeah. It's actually
I
funny
think
that you
activism.
mention that, because, I mean, it's been proven time again that Mexico actually wishes to become highly involved in our political system, primarily due to the fact that a large portion of their GDP consists of the American dollar. Because a lot of immigrants ship their money that they, have working in a orange field out in Florida, they ship that money back home. And people in Mexico, they do spend that money on localized goods and so forth.
Yeah, I mean it's there's like I said, there's tons of economic trouble that comes from the current immigration policies and even just the current way we view immigration and our borders. Which is why, again, not to get too off topic, but the whole solar panel wall and the whole aesthetic behind that idea, it sounds crazy, but it could actually work to change the perspective again, maybe in 10, 20 years of the American people, their perspective and the way they view our borders and immigration policy and things like that. Right now, it's I think Sticks talked about it. It's like the ugliest. The wall is the ugliest representation of American politics. But put solar panels on it, put a speed, silver bullet train on it, and 10, 20 years from now, people are going to view it as nothing, more, nothing less than, part of American infrastructure, and it's, yeah, but that's another spiel entirely. But yeah, I mean, so moving specifically like onto the right, the what everyone's talking about now is the alt light versus the alt right. So you have
Hmm.
like essentially civic nationalism uh, versus the more hardened nationalists, the more hardened
Yeah, like
alt righters.
the borderline fascists, at least.
Right, right. Um, I do see that situation kind of how you were painting it earlier. Those two groups, I think, will eventually just uh, meld together. They'll have to amalgamate because it's such a minuscule issue to be arguing over. If it's going to lead to the loss of political power in the right, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the alt light will ultimately win out just due to the fact that they're very much willing to work with the people that are centrist right and so forth. Uh, I mean, comparing the fascists to the communists, especially in our modern day democracy, these are two extremes that have always been at odds. But these are two extremes that will, no matter what, they will reliably vote for the person that is ultimately in their favor. So someone like Donald Trump, like ultimately, yes, admittedly, it's not good, it's not great in terms of publicity, but fascists will ultimately vote for Donald Trump over Hillary, and communists will ultimately vote for Hillary over Trump. So they're still a reliable voting bloc, but you do not actually have to relate and interact with these people at all. So I mean, the alt right, And much like the socialists on the left, they're still manageable, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And if anything, I mean, it sounds dirty in nature, but that's kind of all of politics. I could definitely see the alt right and the alt right coming to some sort of agreement where it's pretty much like let us take care of the branding and the messaging, us being the alt right,
Yeah.
and you guys can ride the wave. You guys can be right behind us. You guys can work beneath the shadows, in so to speak. Um, I don't see the two groups actually disagreeing, I guess is what I'm saying. I feel like the alt-right is somewhat fearful to express some of the same sentiment that the alt-right is for, again, loss of political power or loss of social alienation or, again, I'm not fully agreeing with the alt-right either. Um, I'm just saying it does seem that those two groups are much more likely to work together than, let's say, like we were saying, the Black Lives Matter sect of the progressives who want reparations versus the LGBTQ community or
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
There's so many segments of the left. It's hard to keep track.
Yeah, that's very true. The segments on the left, the LGBT, or sorry, not the LGBT, the Black Lives Matter crew who wants the reparations and so forth, they're
Mm.
very much like the people on the right who want to gas the Jews. It's an impossible task, will never be accomplished, completely unfeasible, completely unmanageable. But they're still going to be there, and that underlying message will unfortunately always resonate within the kind of deeper sects of whichever side of the fence you desire to be a part of.
Right.
But it's up to the socialists, or for instance, will always tame and tamper the message of the communists versus the alt-right. They will always tame and tamper the message of the actual fascists. And yes, there are underlying principles that may translate and correlate and so forth. But you're going to ultimately get a much more, dare I say, family-friendly view of of sorts, I suppose.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. So I get. So what you're saying is kind of those fringes will always exist and work to polarize people and move them into those voting blocks, but they will always remain more so on the fringe. The dominant culture will
Yeah.
only allow for a more censored view of the left and the right.
Yeah, exactly. And I especially believe this to be true in America. Europe is a completely different story. Seems always teetering on the brink of either socialism or fascism, but America is a completely different story. I believe it's just due to the fact that we have a completely different experience aside from Europe. We have a completely different experience in terms of dealing with both fascism and communism versus one side might lean in Europe, one side traditionally is more fascist, maybe like Germany, and you can see that. You can see them adopting fascist policies, even though they're a leftist government. You can see them adopting those authoritarian fascist policies. So the right, even though the government in Europe, in Germany specifically, may be more leftist, you see them still adopting policies that are extremely right in nature.
Well, and specifically to segue into that, I'm sure you heard about the Merkel um, gay marriage decision.
I did, and I thought that was, oh, gosh, I'm not gonna lie, I laughed. I had a good laugh. I don't even know what to think of that. I mean, I do know what to think of that, but I thought that was extremely strange, to say the least.
What I thought immediately was she's definitely appeasing her refugee fan base.
That is exactly what I thought as well. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean,
Yeah.
come on, she has a science background. She's not a fucking stupid person.
Yeah.
I don't think she believes that behind closed doors. I don't think she has any problem with homosexuals. Um, so yeah, it's a strange political move. Um, but I kind of have to give her credit where it's due because it is in the sense of it appeasing the followers of Islam, let's just say, in Germany, and while simultaneously appeasing the more rural German, who is probably more religious, it's kind of a smart move. It's fucked up to say.
Yeah, definitely. And what's funny is that, and I've noticed this only just recently, unfortunately, but you can specifically tell what the policies of the future Democrats are going to be in America if you just simply pay just a little bit closer attention to Europe, Germany specifically, because the Democrats, you can tell, are starting to move in the direction that Merkel was only just, I believe, 5 or so years ago. And you can see it now starting to happen within the Democratic Party. The Democrats are starting to forsake the kind of old guard arguments of, gay marriage and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
and they're starting to take up a more hardline stance, especially towards supporting Islam, and especially towards supporting um, social policies and social moralist laws in regards to support of Islam.
And why do you think that is? I mean, I have my own theory, but uh, that's just so fucking strange to me. I don't see how people don't, how that doesn't ring any alarm bells.
Well, see, the thing is that I think the left has already kowtowed and they've already drug in the left, or sorry, the left has already kowtowed and drug in the LGBTQ community. Sorry, I've had a few beers, but so the LGBT
All good.
community
I'm drinking
is
some gin.
already excellent. We're on the same page then. So they've already kind of, I don't want to say brainwashed or anything because I don't know what the thought process is on the left, but they've entrenched gays to essentially vote for the left, much like they've entrenched those who are black to vote for the left, right? If you don't vote for the left, well, then you're just an Uncle Tom. Well, so I suspect in the next couple of years you're going to see the same kind of scenario happen towards the gay community. Oh, well, if you don't vote for the left, well, then you're just a regular Tom or Jerry. You're an Uncle Tom of sorts. That's going to be the rhetoric I think coming out of the left. And the new tactic, I think, is to, now that they have all these different minority groups roped in and dependent on the Democrats, they're going to start trying to kowtow towards the Muslims, who are the new growing minority. Because, I mean, honestly and logically speaking, the gay community is what, like 1% or something like that of the US population? So I would logically think that Muslims, especially if we're bringing in refugees, they're going to be a very fast and very rapidly growing minority, especially in Europe. Oh God, Europe is an entirely different subject.
Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, here in America, if that is the case, and I do believe that to be the case, um, I do think it would help the right to remain more moderate and go the path of the alt light, because, like I said, that's going to have to turn people off eventually. I mean, there's definitely gay people who don't agree with everything the left is doing, and if they get alienated like that, if there's a more moderate option on the other aisle rather than a more radicalized option, it might they might feel more comfortable switching teams, so to speak, and that would definitely benefit the right. At the end of the day, I think depolarization benefits everyone. So, I mean, that's definitely my viewpoint on for both the right and the left. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm kind of cynical about that. I think that it's going to remain polarized. It's probably going to get more polarized, if anything.
Yeah. And I'm only speaking tactfully here, but I think due to the fact that the LGBT community has only been recently roped in by the left, so speaking from a strictly strategic standpoint, I don't mean to sound so apathetic, but hypothetically speaking, it would actually be really easy for the right, as we saw in this past election, to adopt a far more friendly kind of gay narrative or something like that, if you will. It'd be far
Mhm.
more easier, especially now that the left is wanting to pander towards people who want to throw the gays off the roof. I mean, it'd be much more easier for the right to actually take up a pro-gay stance, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. I think, again, politically speaking, from a strategic standpoint, especially after this whole Merkel thing. I mean, if Trump were smart, he would frame it how we're framing it. He would tweet something about, I'm not even surprised that Merkel is. How crazy would that be? Something out like, I'm not even surprised Merkel is banning gay marriage. She's in bed with the jihadists or something. He's not going to do something that crazy. But you got what I'm saying. That how crazy of a tactic strategically would that be?
Yeah, and the crazy part is that I think that is actually well within their ability. Like, I know this sounds surprising to some people, but like, we've seen stranger things happen, as I'm sure you know, this past year.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everything's become a meme essentially with with our politics. So I could actually see that happening. Um, but yeah, that would be the pendulum is definitely swinging to the right, and I don't think many conservatives or Republicans were ever really against gay marriage, except for the fact that their voting base were fundamentalists, Christians. And now that tide is turning, now that the right is seeing how hypocritical the left is for supporting Islam, who is extremely homophobic, to a degree that Americans have never even witnessed. I think that the right is starting to become a little bit more open to the LGBTQ community, or at least gay marriage and things like that, and at least enough to the point where the Republican Party can start to kind of change their image, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think the only reason the Republicans were like that in the past, and it's been a dead issue for, I want to say, maybe 5 or so years, gay marriage, that is. But I think the only reason the Republicans were like that is because they just honestly they had to pander to the evangelical crowd. And I'm not saying that if you disagree with gay marriage, you're an evangelical or anything. I don't personally disagree with gay marriage. I do find problems within the community, and that's hence why my disagreement. But I think that's really the only reason they ever pandered to that audience specifically.
Right.
And also, if you'll excuse me, I have to do something really quick.
No problem. I'll entertain for a second. So, actually, I need to send a text to the one viewer. Give me 1 sec. Right. So, I guess brief summary uh, during this intermission. Uh, it seems, at least to me, that the divisions, the apparent divisions within the left and the right, will cause some sort of schism, because we are going through so much chaos, so much transformative change in American politics. But it does seem the right is better suited to recover from that schism, or better achieve cohesion within their ideology, within their party, than the left. The left has far too many schisms.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. A lot of people, they talk about, especially nowadays, they talk about how, like, the left and the right, there's so much infighting and so on, that it's almost like the Weimar Republic over again. I'm just, do you have any thoughts on that issue?
I mean, I tend to believe that we're not going through anything much different than we've already experienced in the past. So, in ways, just the age-old saying, history tends to repeat itself. My friend was telling me the other day, not even with just the divisions and the infighting, but also with the violence, the stabbings, the political violence, and things like that. He was so taken aback by that, or surprised by it. And I mean, it is surprising, and I guess kind of it's hard to experience this, but it's nothing new.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's fun to experience, quite frankly. But maybe that's just my cynical, sadistic nature. You know, I like to see the world burn.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree. It's funny to be living in history, I suppose, if you wanna phrase it as that. But no, I totally understand. I don't think it's quite extreme as the kind of Weimar Republic era, due to the fact that we don't quite yet have fascists. The kind of Kekistani movement or the pull movement, whatever you want to call it, seems to be just kind of disaffected people from the right and libertarians and so forth taking a hardline stance. Even a few people from the left taking a hardline stance against the kind of socialist policies.
Right. That paired with just again the age we're living in. You know, there's an old Cole Porter song from Fallout, "Anything Goes." I'm sure you know it.
Yes, I do.
You know, and he's pretty much just talking about even then how things have changed. You know that essentially things are becoming more degenerate, for lack of better words. And
Yeah.
I think with that, you know, paired with what you were saying, just comes people more willing to just be brash and be crass, and that doesn't necessarily that's not necessarily a label that you can slap on them, or you can't. Uh, how can I say? That's not necessarily an indication that they're a fascist or a racist or whatever the insult nowadays is.
Yeah.
Um, I guess what I'm
And
trying to say, you know, in a short ways, it's a lot of it is humor.
absolutely. I mean, even when you see, like, if you look at the Kekistani flag, if you look at it a little closely, you can see that there is a stark resemblance to the Nazi Weimar flag as well. So, I mean, you see all these adaptations of culture and whatnot. Uh, it's primarily a joke. Even on the left, I'm willing to give this slack, and I'm willing to give leeway to the left as well. A lot of this shit is honestly humor. Like when people on the left come out and say, "Oh, well, you're nothing but fascists," and so on. Well, then people who are kind of center right or maybe even centrists themselves, even people like Sargon of Akkad, who he considers himself center left, not to fucking plug him, but
Right.
you know, he considers himself center left, but he's taken up the kind of Kekistani movement and he's adopted it as his own, as kind of a gag, I suppose you could say. And the Kekistani movement uses Nazi symbology because oh well, you're such a Nazi, you're such a Nazi. Well, what if I am a Nazi? What are you going to do about it? It's that kind of humor, you know.
Right. And I definitely think it was a backlash from the years of Obama, and the internet during that time was a much different place.
Yeah, it was.
You know, and liberal ideology, the liberal intellect, so to speak, kind of dominated the internet spheres, the mainstream, you know, internet spheres, and that has definitely changed. You know, you're seeing a lot of different memes on your Facebook feed. Let's just put it that way. You know,
Yeah. Well, and I can understand why. I mean, honestly, if I had to vote for Obama and McCain again, I would definitely vote for Obama because there are a few things he did that I kind of agree with. You know, there are a few things that the Supreme Court did that I kind of agree with, but ultimately, like after the first 6 months, it's just shit in my opinion because it's like after the first 6 months it's like cool, you got quite a bit of stuff done. I half-assedly agree with some of this, but the rest after that it's socialist policies like rolling back gun legislation and or not rolling back but pushing rather more gun legislation, restricting the liberties that you know are going to hurt and harm people on the right, and just all this kind of bullshittery. You're enacting policies that everyone knows are, I don't want to say extremist, but blatantly in favor of the left, and people are going to retaliate in some form or
right,
another.
of course. Um, and that's actually one thing I gotta give Donald Trump credit for. I mean, I know the left, the liberal media is going to smear anything he does, but I see him as quite moderate so far. I don't think he's done anything too ideologically, you know, cookie cutter Republican. He hasn't done anything about gay marriage. He hasn't done anything about abortions. I mean, there's
Yeah.
rhetoric circulating, but he hasn't done anything. So,
Yeah, and that's why I like him so much, just due to the fact that, he's not a cookie cutter Republican. I mean, he is a Republican in a sense, but he's a Republican in the ways in which I want him to be a Republican. 'Cause gay marriage and stuff like that, like, I don't give a shit about gay marriage. That is on one of the lowest rungs of stuff that I give a shit about. I
mhm.
am far more concerned with gun rights. I'm far more concerned with immigration control and so forth. He's Republican on literally the right amount of issues.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the whole uh, gay marriage stuff, like you said, it's more so the issues prevalent within the community that I care about is a better way of even
Yeah.
phrasing it. It's not even like I'm against it. I think there should be more mental health studies conducted to help these individuals. But even that, you're just
Yeah.
labeled as a bigot, and it's just like, all right, and then you get tossed into the category of the Ted Nugents, and all the Republican bigots that circulate a liberal's head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's so frustrating because that is exactly, it's the old adage of extremism breeds extremism. And it's so funny 'cause what happens when the people who take up the Kekistani movement, what happens when they've been radicalized for so long that they actually start to believe in what they preach? Someone who might mockingly say, throw the Jews in the oven or Deus Vult or something. What
Right.
happens when, after oh so many generations, they actually start to take up that hardline stance as an actual banner? Like, what happens if we get the Crusader Party or something like that, and their goal is to actually retake Jerusalem? Like, I know it's a meme now, but wait until this shit has been pushed to the extremes and that this is starting to become actual legislation.
Right, and
And
that and
that
that's
is what's so dangerous.
yeah, that's I guess kind of what I was saying with the if the left really doesn't want fascism and all this extremism, then they need to depolarize themselves. That's the only way to counterbalance the right, really. Because if they get more and more extreme, the right is gonna follow through with some of this shit.
Yeah,
Not all of it, but some of it.
yeah. And I know this might sound extremely weird, but the reasons I support Trump are the reasons I'm not gonna lie, I would actually somewhat be okay with a Bernie Sanders presidency. Because Trump doesn't, he abandons the old guard kind of train of thought, and he doesn't harp so much on the moralist policies. And that's somewhat like what Bernie Sanders has done. He's abandoned the gun legislation argument and so forth. Um, but at the same time, he does have kind of radicalist policies. But I would actually be okay with that because I know even Democrats among him, Democrats don't even like him that much. And so Democrats and Republicans both wouldn't want to enact his policies. He would be very much a Democratic form of Trump. So there are policies that I know there are policies I know that Sanders would support, but they would never be enacted just due to kind of some more radical views he has in terms of socialism.
Right. Uh, so almost the more radical the president, the less they can accomplish.
Yeah,
The more
to a
moderate they are.
degree. It's kind of weird. It's like finding, especially when you're comparing Trump and Sanders, like they both have this odd balance of fuck, I don't know how to describe it. It's an odd balance of centrism to a degree. So I mean, Trump, for instance, he's fine with gay marriage, and he's abandoning the kind of old bullshittery that no one really cares about that much anymore. I mean, he even held up an LGBT flag at a Republican rally, and everyone golf clapped at the very least, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, Bernie Sanders, I think the reason he didn't win is because he was not moderate enough on enough issues. He was too hell-bent on socialism. But then again, that's one of the reasons why I would have honestly been kind of okay, because I know no one in Congress or the Senate, no one would have supported him in his views. He would have gotten literally nothing done as a president.
Yeah. I mean, well, none of the Republicans would, that's for sure. You don't think there's some Democratic congressmen who are all for that?
No, and the reason I think primarily they would oppose him is due to his views on guns. Due to the fact that the Democrats are still a very moralist party, whether we like it or not, they're still a very moralist party. They're still hell-bent on uh, controlling guns and controlling this, that, and the other, controlling, religious tendencies that one might have in the state or whatnot. And it's so funny because those are topics that literally no one gives a shit about. If
Right.
you want to set up a fucking what's that called with the little Jesus baby and the like a
The nativity scene.
nativity scene. Thank you. I obviously have not gone to church in a while, but there are Democrats that will complain about setting a nativity scene in your front yard. Oh well, this violates the X, Y, and Z of your neighbors because your neighbors are Muslim or whatever. Honestly, no one gives a shit about that, but they still hold those kind of views. And that's what fucking killed them in the end, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and I think if that's why they keep going down that route, and again, not if they don't try to pull closer to the center, they're fucked. They're fucked in the long run. Um, with the gaining momentum of the libertarian ideology, I mean, I know they don't have a candidate now, but I can even see the Libertarian Party becoming more dominant in the political spectrum
Yeah,
if the Democrats continue to fuck up.
yeah. And honestly, that's my wettest dream. I really hope the Democrats do fall apart because that would really give leeway to the libertarians. Because I've taken a political compass test, and I've considered myself a right-leaning libertarian for the longest time. So in my opinion, the libertarians are the perfect party, and understandably not to others because disagreements on X, Y, and Z issues. But I would love to finally be somewhat accurately represented rather than being half-assedly represented by the Republicans in terms of guns and X, Y, and Z, or the Democrats in terms of gay marriage and marijuana and X, Y, and Z and so on.
Right.
You see, it doesn't matter who I vote for, only half of my views are represented. So it
And
would
then
be
you
nice to have a third party. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, I've always considered myself a libertarian, more right leaning as well. I was actually I've discussed this on my channel, but I was actually not all too opposed to Bernie Sanders either. I actually voted for him in the primaries um, in California, just because. I mean, really, there's no excuse. I ended up voting
Yeah.
Trump afterwards, but the populism surrounding Bernie Sanders. Again, I like to see things burn, so I thought Bernie Sanders was a good option to just kind of destroy the current establishment. My views ended up changing on that clearly, but
Yeah, so have mine. I mean, at first I thought Bernie Sanders was okay. Like I thought he would have done okay as a president, all the socialism aside. But then he started spouting off shit like white people don't know what it's like to be poor, and then he let the Black Lives Matter hijack his podium. And
yeah,
like after so many mistakes, it's just like, dude, I'm sorry, I cannot support you though. Like I don't even support your views initially, but now I would never vote for you in a million lifetimes.
yeah. I mean, one of the biggest things for me was just like the prospect of him going after Wall Street bankers and the Federal Reserve. That was the
Oh,
biggest thing that was like a
yes.
rumor circulating that I was like, I fuck with that. And again, I wanted to see things burn. I didn't necessarily think he was going to do. Uh, I didn't necessarily think he was going to be a good president. I thought more so he would potentially do so bad that he would drag everything down with him. If that makes Um, but that would make for a fresh start. That's kind of how I view Trump. That even if he fails miserably, he's going to expose all the bullshit, while he goes down in flames. Um,
Yeah, I hope so. The Federal Reserve, I know this is fucked up, but I really hope the Federal Reserve goes up in flames. It's not to sound like a complete, jihadist or anything like that against the Federal Reserve, but yeah, no, I hate the Federal Reserve.
yeah,
That has been a talking point. Like, if you say the Federal Reserve doesn't need to exist, you've guaranteed my vote pretty much.
yeah, yeah. And it wasn't. He never said it straight up, but he had. I forget what the comment was, and it was early on the campaign trail. But that was the one. That was the one thing where I was just like, man, if that happens, all we need is a small investigation of the Federal Reserve, or not even a small one, an invasive investigation of the Federal Reserve done, and the American people won't stand for what is discovered. It'll have to be destroyed at that point. So, yeah, I'm all in favor for that. But yeah, Bernie Sanders is clearly just a fucking hack at this point, man. And
Yeah.
both him and Jane are under investigation. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if they're both guilty, quite frankly.
Yeah, that was actually something that I found actually very amusing. Have you actually read into that a little bit more? Because I only know the initial. I read like one or two articles. Or no, I read
Right,
one. I read one article, like the day that it was announced, but I didn't follow up on it.
right. So yeah, I have. I think it's from my understanding, Jane Sanders. There's some fraud involved with Jane Sanders when she was president of Burlington College.
Yeah.
He took out a loan for some property for the college, and now it's being investigated that Bernie Sanders might have forced or coerced them to give out the loan in the first place.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it doesn't sound like too much has changed then.
Right.
Well,
No.
that's nevertheless that's extremely interesting.
Right. And I mean, I'll admit it might be somewhat of a political witch hunt, but I mean, you know, comparing it to this whole Mika and Joe Scarborough shit, it's like I've always said you got to fight fire with fire. If that's what this is, if Bernie Sanders is hardly even, involved in any criminal aspect, but he's still being smeared by the more conservative media. I mean, I can't argue that, man. They do that all the time to the right, and
Yeah.
they're just now starting to get a taste of their own medicine. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to have to deal with it.
It wouldn't surprise me if this was a witch hunt coming from the left, just due to the fact that Bernie Sanders, for years, ever since I think it was the late '80s that he took up his seat, um, ever since ever since Bernie Sanders has been in the public eye, he's been a relatively clean and sparkly figure. And that's not something I like to admit, due to the fact that he's a socialist, and I hate socialism, I hate communism, but he has been a relatively clean figure in terms of public appearance and PR and whatnot.
Mhm.
So for this to only just now come out, I find rather suspicious. Like just now, when the Democratic Party needs to revolutionize and have some kind of Bernie-like figure, I find it very suspicious that they're starting to just now throw him under the bus.
That is true. That is true. I didn't look at it that way, but that's a possibility. The reason I didn't look at it that way is because I'm kind of under the impression that, well, me and Caveman had a conversation about it before, but um, pretty much that the Democratic Party was going to go through a stage transformation and allow some Bernie Sanders like figure to take control,
Mm,
make
yeah.
it seem to the people more natural. But maybe they still hate him. Maybe they're just I don't know. I've never been able to pinpoint the relationship there that he has with the Clinton Foundation and the Democrats, and
Yeah.
it's a weird vibe I get.
Yeah, and unfortunately, all we can do is speculate. Without being Democratic insiders ourselves, the best thing we can do is sit here and talk shit like we are currently. I mean, there's no way to tell if the Democrats are actually trying to revolutionize their party. They might use someone like Elizabeth Warren or something as a kind of a flagship to propagate more progressive ideology. But then again, at the same time, and if the progressives have very different goals than the Democrats, like the Democrats, the people who are currently in charge of the Democratic Party, they have totally different agendas, and so you might see a butting of heads. But it could go either way. Honestly, it's hard to tell, man.
Yeah. No, I agree. My voice is echoing terribly. Apparently, someone said in the comments. See if I can fix this. Is that better? Can you hear me well?
I can. It doesn't sound like it was before. It sounds like maybe your computer's microphone instead of your actual microphone.
Yeah, I did change it. That was the one I thought that. All right. How about now?
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay. Hopefully that's better with the echo. I still hear a little bit of it, but hopefully it's not as bad. Oh, all right. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess we should wrap up. I don't want to rant too long on this topic. We kind of already covered the Merkel shit, and I mean, I guess we can finish it off with the James O'Keefe stuff. Have you seen the new video, the new Project Veritas
I actually haven't seen the video, but I'm well aware of the contents.
context? Right? Yeah, same here.
Yeah. Um, I'm not gonna lie, this is so fucking satisfying. And it's funny that you mentioned this. I'm actually literally just about to post a video about this that somewhat touches on this bullshit. I just need to literally click the publish button. But it's so fucking funny that the Democrats have been propagating the same fucking message for years, or for a year now. And even though it's falling apart, they're probably still gonna fucking talk about it. I can't fucking stand that shit.
Yeah, I was discussing that with my dad actually. It's the story's completely ruined at this point, but they're still gonna run with it, and people are still gonna believe it. That shit's crazy.
Yeah.
It's and it's similar to the way they've entrenched the LGBTQ community to vote Democrat. They've just completely, again, brainwashed, for lack of better words, their base into thinking that Trump is some sort of Russian spy. That's their ultimate truth. They want that to be true so bad
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter what evidence is put out against it. It's
It's a relative truth, so to speak.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean,
I know exactly how you feel. It is so, God, it's infinitesimally fucking frustrating, just due to the sheer fact that you know they're still going to talk about it. Even though a CNN official came out and said, yeah, largely the story is bullshit, there's no evidence to back it up, there never was evidence to back it up, there is only the vague understanding that this hacker may or may not have been through may or may not have been through or connected to some kind of Russian server. But aside from that, it's Russia.
yeah. I mean, there's absolutely no proof. Do people forget they used Fallout footage or a fucking screen cap from Fallout to prove that there was Russian hacking
Yeah.
like 4 months ago? I mean, come on, it's fucking ridiculous.
Oh shit, I almost
It's
forgot
been
about that.
ridiculous. I love the memes that came out of that, like the Brotherhood of Steel, just like
Oh,
with
yeah.
the captions like Trump has enlisted new militia, like just to patrol borders. Oh man,
Oh yeah, those are the good old the golden days of Fallout memes, I have to say. But yeah, no, that was just God, CNN, especially the past year, has made such egregious mistakes that it is impossible for them to ever recover the audience they had before. Like, at least before this last election cycle, they had the illusion. They at least had the illusion of political neutrality, and that has completely fallen by the wayside. They are now blatantly, obviously, in support of the Democrats, and they literally can't even hide that fact now.
Is their base that stupid? Like to just how? I don't understand, man.
That is a very
Because I
fine question.
because I know dudes like our age. I know millennials our age who believe this shit. They're not 55-year-olds watching CNN every night. You know,
Yeah.
I,
Well, even my
I,
girlfriend, I mean, my girlfriend, she leans a bit more to the, I think I had her do Political Compass for shits and giggles, and I think she was like a left libertarian or something like that. But
okay.
she's a bit more to the left than I am, and even she doesn't buy into this shit. I mean, she thinks it's fucking embarrassing that they used Fallout footage on CNN. You know, that there's still largely, there's no evidence for some of the stupid bullshittery that's just fucking they keep talking about. It's
Oh,
ridiculous.
but now we know it's probably for ratings. They're a business. They're a
Yeah.
business, and it's just about the money. So if they're still making good money, they're gonna run with the story. They're not necessarily trying to inform people. They're not necessarily trying to misinform people. It just falls somewhere in the middle or more towards one or the other in some cases, depending on what kind of money that story's bringing in. That's the
Yeah.
sad reality.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some very sickening aspects as to the way media's run nowadays. Especially due to the fact that it's such a profit-driven business that it doesn't matter what the topic is, you know, if it's Kim Kardashian's baby or if it's Hillary Clinton toppling like the third tower on 9/11. Well then, it's headline news is propagated to a specific narrative and sold and pandered to a specific set of people.
Yep. And that's why fuck all the mainstream establishment news. Fuck Fox News. Fuck CNN.
Yeah,
Again, I want to
yeah.
watch it burn.
I don't even watch any mainstream news anymore. I don't even watch Fox News. I don't watch CNN or MSNBC. I watch people on YouTube and I read articles as well as many articles as I can from kind of the more underground websites.
Yeah, I feel it. That's exactly what I do as well. Well, yeah, man. I think we should wrap it up here. I got one video to film before I gotta head out and run some errands. So,
Sounds
but
good, man.
thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank you.
discussing. I just wanted to have someone to bounce some ideas off of instead of just making like a 30-minute ranting video on this subject myself. I would have done that gladly,
No worries. Thank you
but
very
yeah,
much for having me on, dude. I always appreciate this discussion. Always lots of fun with you.
of course, of course. We still need to get around to the occult rant. We've been lagging on that, but
Yes, we do.
we'll do that soon. Yeah, I hope you get your computer fixed sooner rather than later.
Oh, me too. All right, thanks a bunch, dude. Really
But,
appreciate it.
yep, take it easy, man.
Bye.